Dzień dobry. Miło mi Państwa powitać na sesji
Good
edukacyjnej
afternoon. It's so
zorganizowanej
nice to
przez
welcome you to
Międzynarodowy
the
Centrum
educational
Edukacji
session
Auschwitz i
organized by the
Holokauście w Państwowym
International
Muzeum
Center for
Birkenau.
Education about
Dzisiejsza
Holocaust in
sesja
Auschwitz.
poświęcona jest roli
Today's session is
archiwum
devoted
w
to the
miejscu
role of
pamięci.
archives at
Sesja
the
transmitowana jest
Museum
na żywo i
Memorial.
tłumaczona
We
na język
are
angielski.
live
O
in
otwarcie
Polish and in
sesji
English.
proszę Pana
May I
Rafała
now
Pióro,
ask Mr.
zastępcę
Rafał
dyrektora
Pióro,
muzeum.
Deputy Director of the museum, to open this session.
Dzień dobry.
Good afternoon.
Witam wszystkich Państwa na sesji
May I
zatytułowanej
welcome all of you, ladies and gentlemen, to a session
w miejscu pamięci.
on
Dzisiejsza
retaining
sesja jest drugą w cyklu
authenticism, the role of
zatytułowanym
archives. It's
Autentyzm.
the second of
Pierwsza
the
poświęcona
retaining
historii
authenticism
terenom,
sessions. The
druga
first was
budowlanym
about the
budowlom.
historical
Ostatnia, trzecia
premises
sesja
and
natomiast będzie poświęcona zbiorom przechowywanym w
constructions.
muzeum.
The last one
W
will be
ramach
about
przygotowania
the
na dzisiejszą sesję
collections.
prezentacji
The
postaram
presentations
się
for
przybliżyć
today will
Państwu
try
różne
to
aspekty pracy naszego
cast a
archiwum.
light into
Poza
various
charakterystyką
aspects of
gromadzonych
work of our
archiwaliów,
archive.
zbiorów
Not only
audiowizualnych,
information about what
opowiem
there is
o
in the
roli
archives in
archiwum w
audio and video
kontekście
collections,
funkcjonowania muzeum
we'll discuss
i miejsca
also
pamięci.
functioning of the museum
Pokażemy,
and
jak
the
istotną rolę
uh,
pełni archiwum w
place of
kontekście
memory.
poszukiwania i
We'll
uzupełniania informacji o
emphasize
zbiorach
how important the
powstałych.
archive is to complement and
Przedstawimy
supplement
zarówno typowe prace
information about the
bieżąco
victims.
wykonywane przez
We'll speak
archiwum,
about the
jak i
current works in the
zainicjowane i
archive
zrealizowane przez
and
zespół
also
działania o
those
charakterze
initiated by the
projektowym.
team, various
Warto tutaj wspomnieć
project
chociażby o
works. It
przeprowadzaniu
makes
kwestii i
sense
udzielaniu
to
odpowiedzi
mention
na
all the
bardzo
queries
liczne
and provision
zapytania
of
dotyczące
answers
losów
to
ofiar
numerous
Auschwitz.
questions
Swoją
concerning
drogą to
the
około kilka
fate of
tysięcy
Auschwitz
odpowiedzi.
inmates.
Chciałbym
Every
podkreślić
year there
jednocześnie
are several
istotne znaczenie
thousand such
dokumentów,
answers.
materiałów i
May I
komunikacji,
also emphasize the
które poza
importance of
wartością
iconography and
dokumentalną i
documents that,
historyczną
other
stanowią
than
także cenne
historical
źródło
proofs, are
wiedzy,
also
która
a
pomaga
precious
nam na
source
przykład
of
potwierdzić
knowledge that helps, for
oryginalność
example,
zachowanych
to
obiektów budowlanych
confirm
i
that
ich
the
elementów.
preserved
Korzystamy
buildings or
wtedy
elements
z
thereof have
oryginalnych
been
rysunków,
are
projektów
original.
wykonanych w
We
czasie
use the original
funkcjonowania obozu, czy
design
też z
that
pierwszych
operated
powojennych fotografii i
in
filmów
the camp or
dokumentalnych.
the early photographs and
Przedstawimy
documentary
także archiwum cyfrowe, które
videos. We will
stanowi nie
also
tylko
present the digital
zabezpieczenie
archive,
treści zawartych w
which
oryginalnych
not
dokumentach,
only protects
ale
the
pozwala
contents of
również
the
w
original
sposób
documents, but also
uporządkowany i
makes
całościowy
it possible in a
udostępnić
manner that is
archiwowane
both
dane
ordered and
szerokiemu gronu
complex
odbiorców.
to provide
Warto
this
też
data
przybliżyć
to a
problematykę
broad
konserwatorstwa
range
dotyczącą
of
archiwaliów
recipients.
oraz
At the
rolę
end, we will
badań
discuss the
chemicznych i
archives and the role
meteorologicznych,
of
które
microbiological and
wykorzystujemy
chemical
do
studies that
opracowania
we
programów
use to
konserwacji
develop
zbiorów
programs
archiwaliów
for
i
conservation of
monitorowania
archival
ich
collections
stanu
and
zachowania.
monitoring of their
Dowiedzą się
degree
Państwo nie
of
tylko, jak
preservation.
konserwujemy dokumenty,
You will learn not
ale
only
jak
how
istotny
we
jest
conserve documents,
zaplanowany
but how
zabieg
important it is
konserwatorski,
to
które
plan all the
uwzględniają
conservation
zestaw zachowanych
procedures that
dokumentów. Tu
take into
podkreślę, że w
consideration
naszym
that some
przypadku
documents
często
may
wykonane
not
są z
be
materiałów o słabej
preserved
jakości,
in good
przez co są
state.
delikatne i bardzo
Many of them were
wrażliwe.
made in
Chciałbym tutaj
very
zwrócić
poor
uwagę na to,
quality
iż dzięki
materials.
temu, iż w Muzeum
I'd like
znajduje się
to
dyplomowana
emphasize that
konserwatorka,
thanks
prace
to the
konserwatorskie są
expert
prowadzone
conservation
z
officers
uwzględnieniem
in our
najwyższych
archive,
standardów, ze szczególnym
we run our
wykorzystaniem
works according
doświadczeń
to the highest
uzbieranych przez
standards,
nas
using
od
experience
roku
that we have
2003,
gathered
kiedy
since
to na
2003,
miejscu w muzeum
when
powstały
here on
pracownie
the spot in
konserwatorskie.
museum we developed
Nie,
our
jak w
conservation
przypadku
workshops.
konserwacji innych obiektów
Just
wojennych,
like with the
przy
conservation of
konserwacji
other
archiwalnej
historical
stosujemy
objects,
zasadę
here we
primum
use
non
the
nocere, czyli po
principle
pierwsze przede
primum
wszystkim
non
nie
nocere,
szkodząc.
first do not
Chciałbym również podkreślić rolę zespołu,
damage, do
który w
not
różnym
harm.
zakresie
I'd
zajmuje
like to
się zbiorami
emphasize the role
archiwalnymi.
of
To
the
przede wszystkim
teams.
archiwiści i historycy,
First,
ale
these
także
are
specjaliści z zakresu
archival
baz
experts,
danych,
historians, experts in
informatycy oraz
databases, IT
konserwatorzy czy
experts,
chemicy i
and then
mikrobiolodzy.
chemists and
Nasze doświadczenia potwierdzają,
microbiologists.
jak bardzo
Our
poza
experience is
kompetencjami
a proof how
istotne
very
jest
much, other
wieloletnie
than
doświadczenie
competences,
zespołu
it's
w
material
pracy
to
z
have a
archiwaliami i
very well
umiejętność
weathered
analizowania
team
i
in working with
integrowania danych
archives
grupowych. and the capacity to integrate source data. This lets us complement our knowledge of the fate of the deported and the inmates, and in this way to retain the memory of them. Now, some sentences about financing. The current works are financed from the funds of the Ministry of Culture and National Heritage and the funds that the museum gathered, fundraised. We also run projects from external funds, from donors, and parts of grants. Now, conservation of archives is part of the global part of conservation. As you know, it's a long-term conservation program that was developed and is conducted by the museum and is financed from the funds entrusted by the Auschwitz-Birkenau Foundation.
za uwagę i życzę
Thank you for your attention, and I wish you a good session.
Panie dyrektorze, bardzo dziękuję za
Director,
wprowadzenie do
thank you very
sesji.
much for
A
introduction
teraz
to that
zapraszam
session.
panią
And
dr
now
Agnieszkę
I'm
Kitę, która jest zastępcą
asking
kierownika
Dr. Agnieszka
archiwu
Kita, who is
i
deputy head
opowie
of the
między innymi
archive,
o historii
who
archiwum
will
oraz
speak
jego
of
zasobach.
the history of the archive and also about its
Dzień dobry,
resources.
witam Państwa serdecznie.
Hello,
Jak wspomniała
as
pani Maria Martyniak,
Maria Martyniak
właśnie za chwilę
mentioned,
dowiedzą się Państwo z mojej
in a moment you will
prezentacji.
learn from
Mam
my
nadzieję,
presentation
że będzie to
some useful
interesujące
things. I hope it's going to be
i
interesting
wzbogacające
for
Państwa
you
wiedzę
and
na
that
ten
this
temat.
will
Także
expand
tematem
your
mojej prezentacji
knowledge
będzie
here.
rola archiwum w miejscu
I'll be talking
pamięci
about the role of an
i na
archive
czym
at
polega w
a
ogóle to zachowanie
museum
pamięci.
memorial.
Przede wszystkim musimy sobie odpowiedzieć na pytanie,
We
czy archiwa w
must
miejscach pamięci
answer
są
the
potrzebne i
question
do
whether
czego
archives
one
are
służą.
necessary
I już na
in
wstępie
such places and
powiem
what
tak,
they
archiwum
serve.
jest
Let
kluczowym
me start
działem
from
każdego
saying
miejsca
that
pamięci.
yes, an
Muszę
archive
wrócić tutaj w
is of key
uzasadnieniu tego
importance
do
for
naszego
every
muzeum,
such
ponieważ
place.
jako
I'll be
pracownik tego muzeum pozwoli mi
discussing our
najłatwiej to
museum.
zrobić.
I work for this
Natomiast
museum,
trzeba
so
sobie zdawać
information
sprawę,
about it
czy
is
mówimy
going to
o
be
każdym
easiest. We have to
dowolnym miejscu
realize
pamięci czy
whether
muzeum.
we're talking
Musimy mieć
about
na
any
uwadze
other
jakby
museum of
ważność
this.
archiwum.
Whichever this is, we must
Dlaczego
remember
archiwum
that
jest
this
kluczowe?
is an
Wynika
important
to
archive.
jakby
Why is it
ze
of key
statutowej
importance?
działalności
Just
Państwowego
because
Muzeum
it's part of
Auschwitz-Birkenau,
the statutory
którego jednym
operation
z
of
elementów jest
Auschwitz-Birkenau, where
zachowywanie
one of the
czy
elements is
konserwowanie
the
pamięci.
conservation and
Gdyby archiwum
preservation
tak
of memory. If not
naprawdę
for the archive,
muzeum miało
then the
spore
museum
problemy z
would
funkcjonowaniem,
have
jeżeli w ogóle
quite a
mogłoby
problem
funkcjonować.
operating if it
Wydaje
could
się może, że to
at
jest
all
śmiała
operate.
teza, ale za
That may
chwilę
be
Państwu
really
powiem,
a
dlaczego
daring
tak naprawdę coś takiego
speculation or
oczywistego.
claim, but I'll
Ponieważ
tell you in a moment,
w
try to
dokumencie, o
explain that
którym będzie
this
też mówić w
is
dalszej
really
części
something that
prezentacji,
goes without saying,
mówię nam
as the
wszystko o
documents I'm
historii, która
going to
miała tutaj
show you
miejsce przede wszystkim w latach
speak about this history from 1940,
1940-1945. Gdybyśmy nie mieli
1945.
dokumentów,
If
tak
not for
naprawdę nie
those
wiedzielibyśmy, co
documents,
tutaj się
we would
wydarzyło.
not know
Jakieś
what
zeznania
transpired
świadków,
here.
jakieś pamiętniki,
Some
jakieś historie
gossips, some
prawdopodobnie nie do
testimonies of the
uwierzenia,
witnesses,
zważywszy na fakt, co się
possibly
wydarzyło
quite
w tym miejscu.
hard to believe, especially
Tak
when we
naprawdę nie
consider what
mielibyśmy
happened here.
dowodów, mielibyśmy
We would
budynki,
have no
mielibyśmy
proofs.
krótką
We'd
czaskę
have
bez tak naprawdę
barbed wires
potwierdzenia, co
and
tutaj się
buildings
wydarzyło.
without
Dokumenty
corroboration of
pozwalają
the
nam na
actual
odtworzenie tej
events.
historii,
Documents are what
pozwalają
makes
nam
it
na
possible for us
potwierdzenie
to
tego, co tutaj się
learn that
wydarzyło.
history, to
Notabene były
corroborate what
wykorzystywane
happened
jako
here.
źródła i
They
jako
were
dowody w
also used
procesach
as
zbrodniarzych
sources
po
and
zakończeniu
as
II wojny światowej.
evidence in the process of
Dokumenty
criminals
służą
after the end of
nie
the Second
tylko
World War.
archiwistom, właściwie
Documents are
powinny
used not
archiwiści
only by
stać na straży tych
archive
dokumentów,
experts, they are
na
the real
straży tego, aby
guardians
one
of those
były
documents.
zachowane i robią wszystko, aby one
They
trwały
would do
cały czas
anything
w tym
so
swoim, że tak
that
powiem, nienaruszonym
they
przecież zostałym
last
stanie.
in this
Ale
original
prawda
immaculate
jest taka,
state.
że
But the
bez
truth
tych
is
dokumentów
that
prawdopodobnie nawet nie
without those
spotkalibyśmy się dzisiaj na tej
documents, we
sesji.
wouldn't be meeting
Nie
at this
moglibyśmy
session.
przygotowywać
We wouldn't
opracowań
be
czy
able
monografii,
to
ponieważ nie byłoby źródeł.
create
Każdy
monographic
historyk
works
Państwu
because we
potwierdzi,
wouldn't
że
have
dokument
sources.
jest
Every
praktycznie
historian
podstawowym
will
źródłem
really
historycznym, na
confirm that a
pomocą którego
document is
buduje
a
się
fundamental
całą
historical
historię.
source
Interpretacja
which
dokumentów
helps to
jest
build the
niezwykle
whole
istotna.
history. Interpretation of
Dokumenty
documents
pozwalają na
is of
działanie również
utmost
pozostałym działom, jak
importance.
chociażby dział
This
edukacji,
also
który również
allows the
czerpie
operation
prawda,
of the
materiały z
uh,
dokumentów. Dział badawczy, o czym już wcześniej
education
wspomniałam, wystawiennictwo, ponieważ dokumenty
section
niejako
And
obok zbiorów stanowią jeden z głównych
documents
elementów
next to the
dokumentu, gdzie
collection
to powinno
are
znajdować się
one
na
of the
ustawiu,
most
ponieważ są
important
to
elements we have here at
świadkowie tego,
the
co wydarzyło się
exhibition,
tutaj
because
w
they
Auschwitz,
are
oczywiście też w
the
wielu innych miejscach.
witnesses of what's
W związku
happened
z
in
tym
Auschwitz and many other
warto podkreślić,
places.
że
For that reason,
archiwum
it's
pełni
worth
funkcję
emphasizing
nie tylko
that
takiego
an archive
rezerwuaru
is not
wiadomości i
only a
rezerwuaru
reservoir
wiedzy
of
dotyczącej
knowledge and
funkcjonowania
information concerning the
Auschwitz-Birkenau,
operation
ale
of
również pełni taką
Auschwitz-Birkenau,
funkcję
but
zachowującą pamięć o
also
tych wydarzeniach,
retains
ponieważ
the
dokumenty
memory of
będące
those.
nośnikiem pamięci
The
spoczywają w
documents
naszych
that
rękach i
are
my
the
jesteśmy niejako
carrier
za
of
nie
memory, the
odpowiedzialni,
vehicle
a
of
tym samym
memory, are in
jesteśmy
our hands,
odpowiedzialni, z tego
and
względu
we're
za tą
responsible for
konserwację
those.
pamięci
And we are
i
responsible
zachowanie
for
tej
the
pamięci,
preservation of
również za
memory,
przywracanie pamięci
also
oraz
for
trwanie w
returning
cieniu
that
straży
memory,
tego,
and
aby
standing
fakty
guard so
historyczne
that historical
przetrwały.
facts
Dokumenty służą również do tego,
survive, and they
żeby
also
udowadniać ludziom, którzy
are here to
mniej lub bardziej
prove to
złośliwie
people
starają się
who
negować pewne
more or
kwestie
less
związane z
viciously want
funkcjonowaniem
to
Auschwitz-Birkenau w
deny
czasie wojny.
certain
I
issues
zawsze w
of
takiej sytuacji my
operation
możemy
of
wyciągnąć
Auschwitz-Birkenau
dokument i
during the war.
powiedzieć, proszę
Always
Państwa,
then
to
we
wcale
can
tak nie
take a
było i
document
będą
and
tutaj
say,
moje potwierdzenia.
no, it's not,
Oczywiście
this has
archiwum
not been like
musi
that.
współpracować z
This
innymi
is a
działami i
proof.
nie
An
tylko,
archive has
ponieważ
to
archiwum, które
cooperate with other
istnieje, a nic z niego
sections,
nie
because an
korzysta,
archive that
samo z
exists but
siebie
is
nie jest w stanie
unused
zachować
of
pamięci,
itself
ponieważ ta
cannot
pamięć
keep
paradoksalnie
any
zostaje
memory, because
zapomniana w
this
pewnym
memory,
momencie
by
dzięki
a
ludziom, którzy
token of
odwiedzają
paradox, is
archiwum,
forgotten.
dzięki
It's only
pracownikom,
thanks to the
pracownikom
people who
muzeum, ale
visit an
też
archive, not only
ludziom z
to
zewnątrz,
the staff of the
naukowcom,
museum, but
badaczom,
also
studentom.
external
Ta pamięć
visitors,
może trwać,
scientists,
ponieważ oni
researchers,
korzystają z tych nośników
students.
pamięci w postaci dokumentów
They
i przekazują
use
je dalej. W związku z tym
those,
chciałabym tutaj też przy okazji, co jeszcze zresztą
and
powtórzę, zaprosić
I'd
Państwa
like
do
to
wizyty
invite you
archiwum
to
niejako
visit the
wspomożenie
archive
nas w
and,
zachowaniu tej
in a
pamięci
way,
i w, że tak
uh,
powiem,
help us
rozszerzaniu,
retain
można
this
powiedzieć,
memory
pamięci i
and expand it,
historii
and
Auschwitz.
also expand the history of
Teraz chciałabym
Auschwitz.
przejść już
Now, please
bezpośrednio
let
tutaj na
me
naszym
pass
archiwum,
on to
które zostało utworzone
just
w
our archive,
1957 roku,
established in
czyli niejako
1957,
10 lat po
so
powstaniu
10
muzeum.
years after the
Twórcą
museum
archiwum był
was
pan
set up.
Tadeusz Iwaszko. On
Its
opracował
creator was
wszelkie
Mr.
zasady
Tadeusz
prowadzenia
Iwaszko.
zbiorów. On był
He
takim
developed
ojcem
all the
niejako
principles
naszego
of
archiwum.
gathering this
Możemy
collection.
powiedzieć, że
He was
archiwum
the
jest dziełem
father
jego
of
życia, no
our
a my kontynuujemy ten
archive.
jego prace.
It's the
Początkowo
opus
wiele
magnum of his
dokumentów
life,
znajdowało się w
and we
Krakowie w
continue his
Komisji
work.
do
Originally,
Badań
many
Zbrodni
documents were in
Hitlerowskich i one, tak jak
Krakow
wspomniałam,
in the
służyły jako
committee
dowody
for studying
w procesach przeciwko
Nazi
komendantowi
crimes,
Hessowi czy
and were
załodze SS.
proofs against
Dokumenty, które
Hess
znajdują się w
or
naszym
the
archiwum, dotyczą
SS team.
wieloaspektowej historii
The
obozu. Dlaczego
documents here
wieloaspektowej, to postaram się wyjaśnić
concern
Państwu
this
przedstawić w momencie, kiedy
multi-aspect
będę omawiać
of the
poszczególne
camp. I will
dokumenty.
discuss that later.
Szacunkowo w naszych
And
zbiorach znajduje się od
we
5 do
estimate that
7% tej
we have
dokumentacji,
from
która
5 to
powstała w obozie między
7% of what was
1940 a
developed,
1945 rokiem.
the documentation that was
Dlaczego tak
developed in the
niewiele?
camp
Otóż
from
wyjaśnię. Otóż
1940
pod
to
koniec istnienia
45. Why
obozu
so little?
administracja obozu,
Because
czyli
towards the
SS,
end
starała
of
się
it,
zniszczyć jak
SS
najwięcej dowodów
tried
swoich
to
zbrodni,
destroy as
zniszczyć
many
jak
proofs
najwięcej
of their crimes
dokumentacji.
as possible.
Dokumenty te były palone,
Majority of the
niszczone,
documentation, it was
wywożone
burnt,
na
it
zachód.
was
Później
taken
przyszli
to the
Rosjanie.
west, then came
Również
the
wiele dokumentów
Russians,
trafiło
and plenty
do
of
Rosji.
documents
Niestety
also
muszę
found their
powiedzieć,
way to
że wiele
Russia.
dokumentów cały
And
czas
I
znajdzie
must
się w
say
tych
that
archiwach w
many of
Moskwie,
those
a
are
niestety
still
nie ma chęci
in the
współpracy,
Russian archives, and there
żadnej
is no
kooperacji ze strony
willingness to cooperate,
rosyjskiej
to
i
work together.
prawdopodobnie znajdują
And
się tam
quite likely,
dokumenty,
there
które tylko
are
przypuszczamy,
documents
że
that
mogą
we
się
only
tam
can
znajdować, ale
guess
niestety nie mamy
that are there, but
pewności
unfortunately, we
co
don't
do
have
tego. Oczywiście
any
były lepsze czasy,
certainty
kiedy
about
Rosjanie
it.
chcieli
There were
współpracować z nami,
better
próbowali
times
szukać
when
rozwoju
Germans
drugiego, wtedy
wanted to work with
udało
us.
się
That was
odzyskać też
after
pewne
the
dokumenty
fall
jako oryginały,
of
również kopie.
the Soviet Union.
Natomiast
Then
to,
we
co
got
mamy,
some
te 5-7%,
documents, originals
być
and
może dla
copies.
kogoś wydaje się
The
to
5
mało,
to
jednak tak
7%
naprawdę
may
to są
seem
bardzo
little,
duża
yet
ilość
it is
dokumentów.
really
To są
a
metry
great body
wiążące
of documents,
materiału, który opowiada nam
really
historię
plenty of
Auschwitz.
materials
Oczywiście dokumenty,
discussing
które
the
posiadamy, nie
history of
leżą gdzieś
Auschwitz.
sobie na półkach.
It's not
One znajdują
documentation
się w
that lies
specjalnych magazynach.
somewhere on shelves. They are on
Wilgotność i temperatura
special
utrzymywane są na stałym
warehouses
poziomie.
where humidity and
Adekwatnym
temperature
do tego,
are
czy mówimy
retained
o
at a
dokumentach
proper
papierowych,
level,
nazwijmy to,
adequate
czy mówimy o
to
zdjęciach czy
those
mikrofilmach.
uh,
W zależności od
paper
potrzeby materiału
documents. Depending on the
pedagogicznego jest
needs, the
przygotowywana.
temperature is retained in
Dokumenty są
those.
przechowywane zazwyczaj w
They
bezfałszowych
are
teczkach i
usually
pudełkach,
in
czyli są to
acid-free boxes
takie
and
pomoce
folders.
archiwalne, które
So
na pewno nie
that's
uszkadzają dokumentów i
a way
a
not
przynajmniej
to
utrzymują
damage
je
the
w stanie
document
takim, w jakim
and
zostały
to keep
znalezione.
them in the
Również
original state, in the state in
archiwizacja
which they were
dokumentów
found.
jest bardzo szczegółowa
Archiving
i
documents is
dokładna.
also very
Mam tutaj na
detailed,
myśli
meticulous. What I
katalogowanie
mean is
dokumentów, nadawanie
cataloging
im
those,
nazw,
giving
ponieważ
them
nasz bagaż
names,
nie jest
because
zamknięty.
our
My tak
collection
naprawdę
has
cały czas
not
dostajemy
been
nowe dokumenty do naszych biur.
finished.
Są to
We're getting
zazwyczaj
more and more
dokumenty, które
documents to
przekazują
our
rodziny byłych
set,
więźniów.
mostly
Od czasu do czasu
from the
zdarzają się
families
również
of the former
dokumenty
inmates.
z innych instytucji,
Sometimes
z
there are
których udaje nam
also
się
documents
pozyskać,
from
a
other
bardzo rzadko
institutions
to
that we manage to
rodziny
obtain.
sprawców również nam
And
coś przekazują.
from time
Wszystkie
to time, we
dokumenty
also receive
naszych biur
documents
opatrzone
from
są
the
sygnaturą i
families
numerem
of
inwentarza.
perpetrators. Every
Pomaga nam to
document
w
has
porządkowaniu tych
its
dokumentów
inventory number, its
oraz w
call sign.
odczytywaniu ich w
It
razie
helps
potrzeby, kiedy
us
ktoś o nie
find
pyta lub sami
documents
usiłujemy
when
z nich
they are
korzystać.
requested and
Oczywiście
when we
staramy się,
ourselves want
unikamy
to use them.
pokazywania oryginalnych
We
dokumentów
avoid
z
showing the
racji ich
original
wartości i
documents due
wyjątkowości. W
to
związku
their
z tym
exceptional quality
bardzo wiele
and
dokumentów
exceptional
jest już w
value, for
skanach
which
bądź w kopiach,
reason many
więc
of
te
them have been
oryginały nie są
scanned and
narażone
copied
na
so that
kontakt
the
z
originals are
zanieczyszczeniami, nie
not
muszą być przenoszone z tej
uh,
idealnej
in
temperatury do tej
danger
może nie tak
of
bardzo
being
idealnej.
probably
Pewne,
taken to
pewne czynniki
non-ideal
środowiskowe na nimi
temperatures.
wpływają. W związku z tym tutaj również
And
możemy powiedzieć
here
o
we
pewnym
can
zachowaniu
also speak
pamięci,
of
a to z
certain
jednej strony
retention of
spełnić tą funkcję,
memory
którą pełni archiwum,
to
czyli
fulfill the function
pokazywanie
of the
udostępnianie
archive on the one
dokumentów i
hand,
informacji w nich
that's
zawartych, a z drugiej strony
information and showing the
ochrona i
documents,
konserwacja
and on the other,
dokumentów. Oczywiście,
preservation and
jeśli mówimy o
conservation of
konserwacji, to warto też
documents.
zwrócić uwagę,
Speaking of
że
conservation,
dokumenty, które
let's
są w
also
złym
see
stanie,
that
które
the
należy w jakiś
documents
sposób
in
ratować,
poorer
przekazywane są
condition
do
that
działu
need
konserwacji
saving
i tam
are taken
eksperci
to
się
the
nimi zajmują, o
conservation
czym
department,
usłyszą Państwo
where
w
they
dalszej
become
części
the object
naszej
of
sesji. Jakie mamy
care
rodzaje
of our
dokumentów?
experts. What
Tutaj może
types
już
of
tak przejdźmy
documents
do
do
takich
we have?
bardziej merytorycznych
Let's
kwestii.
now speak
To znaczy
of
przede wszystkim są to
the
oryginalne
content.
dokumenty wytworzone
First of
przez
all,
biura
original
uposażonych
ones
istnienia
created
KL
by the
Auschwitz.
offices
Jest
of the
reprezentowany
KL
dokument w
Auschwitz
5
while it
abteilungach, czyli wydziałach.
existed. They
Dalej
come from
materiały
5
obozowego ruchu oporu.
abteilungs, that's
Kopie dokumentów
divisions
dotyczące
of
KL
the
Auschwitz otrzymane z
camp's
innych instytucji.
resistance,
Mam tutaj na myśli
copies received from other
ponieważ inne miejsca
institutions, the Red
pamięci,
Cross,
inne
other
archiwa,
places of
muzea,
memory and
etc.
remembrance,
Materiały
archives,
źródłowe powstałe po
museums, and
wojnie,
all
czyli są to
those.
głównie
Then
akty
the
procesowe
post-war,
przeciwko
and these are some
przeciwko komendancie
files
Goebbelsowi czy załodze
in
SS.
the
Posiadamy
trial
również
of
kopie
Commander
innych
Hess and the
procesów, jak
SS
chociażby
staff.
wyciągi z procesu
Also
Eichmanna,
from
procesu
other
frankfurckich itd.
trials,
Do
Frankfurt
materiałów
trials,
powstałych po
Eichmann
wojnie zaliczają
trials,
się również wspomnienia i
they were
doświadczenia więźniów,
developed
które
after the war,
od właściwie
just
powstania
like the
archiwum były
memories
tutaj
of
do
the
nas
inmates, which
składane,
have
nadsyłane
been
lub
delivered to us from the moment
więźniowie
that the
osobiście
archive
nam
developed.
opowiadali
Many
o
of
swoich
them
przeżyciach obozowych.
we heard
Dalej
ourselves
mamy
here in the
zbiory
archive.
ikonograficzne oraz
Then we
zbiory
have
audiowizualne.
iconography and we have audio and video
Najważniejsze
collection.
dokumenty i tutaj
The most
przykłady.
important
Chciałabym
document.
najpierw wyjaśnić, dlaczego to
First,
najważniejsze
I'd like
jest
to explain
w
why
cudzysłowie,
the, in
ponieważ
inverted commas,
nie
you
możemy
read most
powiedzieć, że jakiś
important.
dokument jest
You can't
najważniejszy,
say that
a
the
inne
document
są
is
mniej
most
ważne,
important and that
ponieważ
others are less
wszystkie one
important
mają
because
wartość.
they
Czy
all
jest to
have a
książka, która
value, whether
zawiera
it's a
setki
book
nazwisk
that
więźniów, czy jedna
contains
kartka z
hundreds of
podpisem
names of
imieniem
inmates or
jakiegoś
just
SS-mana.
a piece
Dla
of
nas
paper
wszystkie te
signed by an
dokumenty mają
SS
ogromne
officer to
znaczenie,
us.
ponieważ
All those
wszystkie
documents
one
are of great
w jakimś
significance
stopniu i z
because
jakiejś
they all,
perspektywy opisują
to
to,
some
co
degree,
wydarzyło się w Auschwitz.
describe
W
from a
związku z
certain
tym
perspective what
najważniejsze
happened here in
w
Auschwitz.
tym kontekście
For
są,
that
ponieważ
reason,
być może
the
najbardziej
most
popularne,
important
należące
here
do
are the most
największej grupy, tych,
popular
których najwięcej się zachowało, tych, których
documents, those
najczęściej
that
się
have been
korzysta.
retained in
W
greatest
związku z tym
numbers that
pozwoliłam
are
sobie
used most
nazwać je
frequently.
najważniejszymi,
That's
aczkolwiek
why I call
nie ma to
them
nic wspólnego
like
np. z
that in
jakąś
inverted commas.
gradacją
It's got
dokumentów.
nothing to
Chociaż
do
co
with
wiadomo,
some
każdy, kto
kind
pracował
of
w archiwum ma
grading
jakieś
those,
wybrane
although I
dokumenty,
believe
które są
that
dla niego najważniejsze,
everyone
z
who
których
works
najczęściej
here has
korzysta.
those that are most
Natomiast
important for
tak
them,
naprawdę mówiąc
that they
poważnie, nie
use,
ma czegoś
but
takiego jak
honestly
najważniejszy
speaking, there
czy
is nothing like the
najbardziej istotny
most
dokument.
important or the most
Tak jak
significant
wspomniałam,
document.
te dokumenty
As I mentioned, the documents that were produced during the operation of the camp were created by so-called departments, or Abteilungen, from 1 to 5. Each of these departments performed a different function. For example, Department 1 was the Commandant's office, so here we can expect documents considering the SS men and, in general, the perpetrators. Next, we have Department 2, which is the Camp Gestapo, the political department, where we have numerous documents concerning prisoners, such as Häftling Personalbogen, which are prisoner personal sheets, Sterberkunde, or death certificate, Zugangsliste, lists of new arrivals, so a lot of documents that tell us about the functioning of the camp, the registration, and the prisoners themselves. Then, Department 3 was the camp management and labor organization. Here, the documents very interestingly illustrate how a concentration camp functioned and what the work of the prisoners looked like. And what we can expect here? Primarily documents that tell us about the prisoner numbers on a given day, documents that show us which prisoners were assigned to which blocks. We also have documents telling us about the work of the prisoners, such as transfer of prisoners between camps, the use of prisoners' labor, what professions these prisoners performed, which work units they were assigned to, and so on. We also have the bunker registry book here, quite an important one, which is the book of Block 11, which tells us about the prisoners held in the bunker and about their fates. So there is also a lot of information about camp life. Then Department 4, which is administration. Here again we can see the functioning of the concentration camp from the inside, because here on one hand we have orders from tailoring or shoemaking workshops made by the SS men. On the other hand, we have information about the official duty journeys of individual SS men. These documents are also very interesting because they actually show us the functioning of the concentration camp. On one hand, we have information that an SS man was sent to bring beer to the canteen, while on the other hand, the next day, such a driver could go to Dessau to bring Cyclone B. So on one hand, the prose of life, on the other hand, evidence of crimes. And finally, Department 5, which is the SS garrison doctor. Here we have all the documents concerning, let's call it, camp healthcare. Prisoners registered in hospitals, the register of procedures performed, such as surgery, the death book, which also includes the so-called Leichenhalle, or morgue. Information about deceased prisoners, information about x-rays, the extraction of gold teeth, and so on, including information about experiments. So this whole five-part structure shows us the functioning of the camp, and these are documents that were created precisely from 1940 to 1945. Quite unique documents from that period are the prisoners' correspondence. These are all the letters that were sent by prisoners from the camps to their families. Sometimes we also have replies to these letters, which is, however, very, very rare. Mainly, these are letters that prisoners sent to their families. Next, documents from the SS Hygiene Institute, which is this institute in Rajsko, which was an institute conducting different tests, examining the composition of air, water, soil, but also such laboratory tests as blood test, stool test, urine test, and so on. Documents of the Zentralbauleitung, which I will not talk about because Ms. Jadwiga Kulesza will tell you about them in a moment. Resistant movement materials are materials that were also created during the existence of the camp, but illegally outside the camp offices, by prisoners and taken outside in various more or less legal ways. These are both secret messages and various kinds of lists of prisoners' names, reports on crimes committed by the SS men, as well as personal information that could not be sent in official prisoner correspondence. So it is really a very, very interesting cross-section of documents. Regarding resistant movement materials, it is also worth mentioning that some documents currently in our collections are also thanks to the activities of resistant movement prisoners. A kind of non-conformist who decided to take the risk to save some evidence for the future. One such document is the so-called Gypsy Camp Book, which contains the names of Sinti and Roma, men and women who were in Auschwitz. This book was hidden during the liquidation of the Roma family camp and was recovered after the war. It survived, admittedly, in a moderate condition, which does not prevent us from appreciating its importance and value, because it contains the name of people who were in Auschwitz. Many of them died. Therefore, it is a document of enormous importance, because it restores the identity of many people. On the other hand, it shows us the activities of the resistance in the camp and even such personal acts of courage by prisoners who decided to oppose the system. Still bearing in mind that perhaps one day these documents would serve to punish the perpetrators or help families find their relatives. Therefore, one can say that this is in a sense an activity of the resistance. Next, we have post-war documents, that is, trial records. These are all kinds of testimonies, copies of documents, statements, excerpts from interrogations, personal information about the accused, lists of witnesses. Everything that was used in the trials and served to convict and sentence, for example, Commandant Rudolf Höss. Next, we have the testimonies and memoirs of prisoners. These are rather specific, as they're not classic documents, but rather accounts of people who survived Auschwitz, who encountered the events that took place in the camp, whose lives were forever marked by the camp. These are very interesting and diverse documents because on the one hand we can expect the dry facts, even listed point by point. On the other hand, we have very emotional stories that may not focus so much on the facts, but rather on the experiences of the individual, which is also extremely interesting because it allows us to study the camp not only based on dry historical facts, but also on certain experiences, which is extremely important for the context and understanding of what Auschwitz was and how it functioned. So, as I mentioned, these are the most important documents in our archive. If you are interested in learning more about the documents, of course, we warmly invite you to visit the archive, to make an appointment with us, to ask questions by email or phone. Contact information for the archive can be found on the museum's website. Each of us will be happy to guide you, answer questions, and if you wish to donate documents, we will also be extremely grateful. Because as you can see, there is still much to tell in the history of Auschwitz. And I hope that the archive will always be the cornerstone for telling the story of Auschwitz and will always stand as a guardian of the memory of what happened in Auschwitz. And as a guardian of the memory of the people, the victims of the camp, but also a warning of the history of the perpetrators, so that we remember that for there to be a victim, there must also be a perpetrator. Therefore, as I say, our documents perfectly fulfill this role. Thank you all for your attention. I hope it was interesting for you, that I managed to show that documents are not just boring papers, but there is actually a lot of life in them that can be reconstructed, that can be brought back, and how important the role of an archive is in a place of memory. It is not just a storage space where scraps are kept. but it is a place that is in a way the heart of every place of memory.
Thank you very much for your attention. Doctor, thank you very much for this interesting presentation and discussion of the role of archives in the operation of memorial site. And now I would like to discuss with you the projects and the collection. So we are going to listen to the contribution of Ms. Jadwiga Kulasza, who is going to discuss the archives, Ms. Anna Jawin, who is responsible for the restoration of identity, Ms. Anna Chowaniec, who works with the Center for Rendering Available Audiovisual Collections, and Mr. Krzysztof Antończyk, who is responsible for the digital archives. So over to Ms. Kulasza.
Dzień dobry, witam wszystkich.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome all the people in the audience, and I would like to discuss the story of foundation of Central Bauleitung in Auschwitz, together with the decision to create the camp in the former barracks of Polish army. There was an institution which was responsible for dealing with all the construction works. Such works for SS officers were carried out by construction management offices, and also central Auschwitz was the responsibility of SS Central Bauleitung, head by August Schlachter. The further part in the organizational part happened after Himmler's visit in March 1941, because in September this year, Auschwitz was visited by Karl Bishop, who was the representative for the construction of the camp for the prisoners of war, who was responsible for the construction of POW camp in Auschwitz. In his letter from the 1st of October 1941, he presented the program for the construction, and already in a document from November the same year, this is the letter presented on the left side of the screen. In November 1941, Karl Bishop sends his request to the head of the department number 2 for the change of the name from SS Zentralbauleitung to Neue Bauleitung. So it was explained by the extensive character of the construction of the camp, the construction of a new hotel in the vicinity, and also another purposes. So the letter from 3rd December 1941 tells us that on 1st December the name was changed into Central Bauleitung. So this was the change of the old stamp with the old name. That is why we had the Central Construction Office, which took all the responsibility for the construction of the camp. The head of it was Karl Bishop and Deputy Walter Urbańczyk. The new management, the new construction management, and the central one belonged first of all to was the responsibility of office number 2 of the main office for the budget of construction of SS, and in spring 1941 the construction inspections were first of all belonged to the East Construction, and from November 1943 the construction supervision for Silesia with the office in Katowice. The construction enterprise fulfilled the tasks of the general investor and the commissioner on the territory of its responsibility, that is, on the territory of concentration camp in Auschwitz, and also in Birkenau and the entire area of interest. These tasks comprised also the organization of construction works, also financial settlements, and also the handing over the ready-made buildings to the users, and also the management of the raw materials, construction materials, and the equipment. The central Bauleitung also consisted of the departments which were necessary for the preparation of the administration, also the main office, with the number growing with the continual development of the camp. The construction management also had the supervision of a couple of workshops and transportation services to Bauhof, that is construction material storage. The central construction management, within its responsibilities, prepared the entire technical and financial documentation together with the plans in various scales. And also, this was the responsibility of the diverse departments of the office. If it was beyond the responsibility, it was ordered with external companies, providing them with the necessary technical data and plans. All the tasks and investments carried out by Central Bauleitung had the specific reference numbers separate for specific parts of the camp: Auschwitz I, Auschwitz II, DAB, Union, TVA, which were known for the lists of the kept in the archives. The basic document for every investment was the construction application, which consisted of a special commentary with explanation, description of the construction financial section, and the technical drawings. Such an application was first of all verified, and then it was seen by special inspectorate and group of offices, for example, specializing in tariffs. Then it returned to the center, to Oświęcim, to Auschwitz, and together with the order to start construction, in which also stated the budget for the execution of a building. So also let me tell you a number of information for Bauleitung, and also it was the change of the staff. For example, in June 1940, the number of staff employed in the office, together with the Schlachter, that is, head number one, was 6 persons plus 14 prisoners. And in 1944, the SS officers within the section were 98, and 80 civilian staff members and 100 male and female prisoners. Both among the SS officers and civilian staff and prisoners who were employed in Central Bauleitung, these were specialists, engineers, and technicians of various specializations, architects, drawers, measurement specialists, all professions which had any connection with construction. The SS officers who held the function of supervisors and directors received, for the period of work, they were promoted to officers' ranks. When they were sent to other service, they would lose their promotion, they would lose the rank. So Bauleitung also employed a group of civilian staff who were also the specialists in construction, and also it employed a significant number of prisoners who also had degrees in construction and other scientific degrees. And moreover, each day, at all constructions carried out by Central Bauleitung and in all workshops which were supervised by Central Bauleitung, so there was a number of prisoners employed as qualifying workforce. So there were days where it was several thousand people.
That was the number on a given day. The Bauleitung hubs, for the 5 years they operated in KL Auschwitz, produced plenty of documents, and in our archives we store about 15 running meters of original documents, about 82,000 pages, that is, of which nearly 4,800,000 original plans. That complex also includes photocopies made from microfilms, and that's over 20 running meters, over 100,000 pages of documents. So just Bauleitung takes more than 35 meters of documents. The documents that were produced in Central Bauleitung in different offices by different commands, different work crews, they come from the earliest days, 1940, and here there are several pages of documents from that earliest period. The first is from the 24th April 1940. These are different bids from companies for some works or for provision of materials. This document was signed by the head of Bauleitung himself, Mr. Schlachter, and it's on different ordering works from the 22nd April to 27th of April in the buildings that were later taken by the inmates. And these are several pages that concerned the cooperation of that company with the camp. The latest documents date back to January 45. This document is the listing of numbers of inmates employed at Section 3 of KL Auschwitz. That's the demand for transport, for transporting construction materials. Speaking of types of documents, well, in the briefest of the brief, these were primarily various orders or decisions of central powers that concern certain employment and development issues, employment of civilians, remunerating them. There's also exchange of letters with central authorities, companies on construction matters, various issues, technical issues, and also problems with deliveries of some hard to obtain materials, also seeking experts for the companies, expert workers work on Sunday, health issues, issuing books of work, leaves, numbers of both inmates and civilian workers who were employed in the work crews in the Central Bauleitung offices as well, documents on the organizational structure of central offices, but also of the Central Bauleitung of KL Auschwitz. A very interesting document is a large report of this second main office of construction that concerns, among others, the works performed at KL Auschwitz, but also at other camps as well. It's also interesting to read a large report for 1942 of the Abteilung C of WHC, that's the main office for economy and administration. Other interesting documents are internal decisions of Bauleitung that concern various issues, cultural, health issues, hours of work, holidays, documentation on internal issues, and also labor description, various roles, for example, of the SS officers employed, circulation of mail, and you can learn a lot from that. Official minutes from the meetings, notes from visits by important officers of central offices. There is also a very large technical and construction documentation concerning many of the so-called Bauwerks from all the parts of the camp, and it contains a big differentiation of documents, logbooks of developments, also proofs of employment in KL Auschwitz for civilian workers, which, for example, could let them not be drafted, so it could really save them from drafting. Central Bau issued such proofs. There are plenty of books of various revenues and also expenditure. So PLAs, there are many plans, interesting GIP, Auschwitz I, Auschwitz II, individual sectors of Auschwitz II, the industrial area, private houses, various changes made there, the heating network, waterworks, wastewater works, even there are drawings of furniture and internal furnishing. There are also plans of certain installations that were never developed, prospects for development of the setting and recreational areas. The documents that I've mentioned allowed us to create a database about more than 2,300 companies that were involved in various ways in the extension and first construction of the camp. The other one concerns the plans, and there is information about more than 5,500 companies. Let's now see how using or going in depth into all those documents, we can see how the camp has changed. There's a plan from December 39. And this is the nearest vicinity of the former barracks. That's the current status quo, together with the adjacent industrial area and the settlement for the SS crew. And that is what the camp was to look like in the future. These are the plans where the barracks are defined for the staff, for the crew, and that's a settlement for the SS families. That's one of the plans that presents the office barrack of Bauleitung, and you see what individual rooms in it were earmarked for. Similar case is with Auschwitz II, where in Birkenau, where before the war there were more than 500 houses. They built a camp. That's what it looks like. That's the current state. And they also intended the construction of Section 4 next to Section 1. Plans entailed such a task. This plan is as far interesting that it concerns a highly detailed task. Well, it shows drainage of water from Section 1. It's also interesting because that's the only plan from November 41 that has the Sonderbauleitung name for the construction of a POW camp. It was made by inmate number 115, who sadly did not survive his work in the camp. All those documents, all those types of documents are an irreversible proof of the existence of the camp and the use of inmates, mass employment of inmates, and considerable profits of private businesses and companies that worked with SS. Thank you very much.